Happy holidays, everybody, and Tony here with a tribute to a Christmas special from a superhero cartoon I've been loving, admiring, revering, and respecting ever since I was a young lad. I'm talking about Frozen Out from Static Shock, which aired on Kids WB on February 22, 2002. This was directed by Dave Hristek and it was written by Len Ule. To say that I love Static Shock is a mere understatement. I absolutely revere, respect, and I am in total awe of the legacy it managed to leave all throughout the years. This was not just another teen superhero show. This was also a show that raised such difficult topics such as racism, gun violence, and even in this case, homelessness, and do so with tact, empathy, understanding, and a lot of intellect that managed to make me, the viewer, relate to the characters as well as understand the situation, which in turn also reflects on what is going on in real life. As someone who grew up with Static Shock, this was a show that made me question a lot of topics and a lot of facets about myself growing up. And when you have a superhero show like that, that can make you unafraid to go into territory that might seem uncomfortable, but you end up going there anyway, then you definitely have a show that knows how to respect its audience. And Static Shock did that with flying colors. I remembered catching Frozen Out ever since I was quite young, and I remembered this being quite a very sad episode. And I also remembered my heart going out to Permafrost, who on the surface was the antagonist of the week, but her story revealed something a whole lot sadder and a lot more tragic than one could ever imagine. And yes, even though this episode did deal with Virgil, aka Static, attend to all the festivities such as Daisy's Kwanzaa celebration, Frida's Hanukkah, as well as the preparations the church has for the upcoming interfaith celebration organized by Reverend Anderson and helped out by not only Virgil, but also his dad and his sister. This is ultimately Maureen Connor's, aka Permafrost's, time to shine. Much like Virgil, she is also a bang baby, as in the product of what has happened with the chemical plant in Dakota, hence those affected with the chemicals gaining powers being known as bang babies. Based on her moniker, Permafrost's incredible powers involve ice as well as snow and ice manipulation. The very first display of her incredible powers was when she was covering the power plant in ice until Static ended up melting said ice, but that didn't stop there. As icicles ended up showering upon the plant, it was almost about to trap Virgil when he tried to get his powers out. And of course, the very person who did that was none other than Permafrost, who at first wanted some change. However, Virgil brushes it off, saying that he doesn't have much time to help her. Feeling rejected, Permafrost also soaks in that mantra. And that's what makes Permafrost a very complex, yet absolutely relatable antagonist. She's not bad, nor is she evil. She's just a lonely girl who also had a lot of unresolved trauma and trauma that has brought her to the state that she was in, all broken, all lonely, and extremely sad. Especially when she looks at a necklace that she really likes, but is told by the store manager that no one needs her or she doesn't even belong here. Even when she sees a mother comforting her child, this also brings back a lot of painful memories. Once upon a time, little Maureen was a happy young girl who, even though had a terminally ill mother, she was still very happy to know that they can be together as mother and daughter. Unfortunately, not all is happy and jolly in the Connor household, as her stepfather was abusive not only towards her mother, but also probably towards her. This was the beginning of all the mental scars that have been occurring in Maureen. Unfortunately, Mrs. Connor's health has not been improving. She has a whooping cough, is then taken to hospital, and given her condition, it can be assumed that she was dead. This left poor little Maureen alone, and just as she was about to be taken in by child protection, she tries to run away. That memory alone broke permafrost on the outside and on the inside. And this is what I definitely loved about this moment. You don't need excessive talking nor excessive exposition to understand just how this character was at this very moment and why he or she behaves this way. It's done through showing. And yes, it's a flashback of what Maureen had to go through. She went through an abusive household with her stepfather not only being cruel towards her, but also her mother. And her mother was terminally ill. So just looking at Mrs. O'Connor, she did not have that much time to live. Losing that one parent who was there for her, who supported her, and who meant so much to Maureen as a child was the one thing that made her feel that she was lost and that nobody wanted her. And when the Big Bang hit, she obtained all these powers, but she used these powers not to hurt others, but to protect herself from the rejection, from the pain, from the trauma, and from all the negative experiences she went through as a child. What's even worse for her was that she was also homeless. And this also ties in nicely to Reverend Anderson, Mr. Hawkins, Virgil, Richie, and even Sharon helping out in the community center alongside the members of the church. Since Mr. Hawkins is a social worker and Reverend Anderson knows fully well the conditions of a homeless person, they are also fully aware that there are 7 million people in the United States who are homeless and who are also affected by a mental disorder because of the lack of outside help. And this moment was not afraid to tackle homelessness with the great amount of compassion it had, because it was able to make me understand that there are many reasons why someone would be homeless. It could be either from a dysfunctional family, it could be a very bad marriage the person had to go through, and many other causes that would result a person into ending up without any home, let alone any security. As Virgil goes into an abandoned car shop, he finds other homeless people and tries to ask where Permafrost is. That is until a woman who knows her shows her her room. And what's also amazing about this room is that she tries to make it a replica of what she used to have as a kid, especially where the glass Christmas angel is concerned, as well as a photo showing Maureen and her mother with her stepfather's face ripped right out of the picture, just to show that the only person that Maureen had was her mother. As soon as Virgil, aka Static, took the photo in order to show Reverend Anderson, Maureen, aka Permafrost, is not too happy that someone would dare invade her space. Reverend Anderson, in turn, knows fully well who this young girl was. Maureen used to attend a lot of church services when she was a child before the whole Big Bang came to fruition. Therefore, the church was a haven for Maureen. The climax was just as epic and just as heart-wrenching, just as Static is about to light the 50-foot Christmas tree, especially since Richie phoned City Council that Static Shock would be a great candidate for doing something like this. Permafrost attacks, and she lets all of her full powers of ice and snow go on show in order for this battle between her and Static to occur. Virgil, after several continued efforts, extends a helping hand to her and calls her by her real name. Permafrost then stops and is at first quite doubtful that someone like him would know about her real name, until she tells her tale of woe. She says that being a homeless person means that no one would ever acknowledge her and no one would ever understand her. She feels that she is abandoned by the rest of the world. However, Static shows compassion towards her because there was one thing that both of them have in common. They both lost their mothers, and he understands what it's like for her. He understands what it's like to not feel welcome into the world and not even feel welcome by other people. And this moment made me swell with tears. This is not just the only occasion that this episode made me well with tears, but what Permafrost had to go through, from the abuse by her stepfather that she had to go through, from witnessing the death of her own mother, from being deprived of her mother, from being deprived of everything that should make a child happy and that should make a child grow, and the mental scarring that she endured for many years for someone who is still in her formative years. All this pain and suffering resulted in feeling that at least she's found someone who did care for her, and she lets her crying and her sadness all out for Static to embrace him and for Static to accept that said embrace, thus comforting her, assuring her that she is never alone and that there are people who are there to help her. This message is also hammered home by Reverend Anderson, who even assures her that yes, there are people who care for her and introduces her to Joanna, who will help her get herself sorted out as well as deal with the emotional trauma that she had to endure. Maureen, now back to her normal human form, says that she wants to get better, and at least that's why Joanna is there. And she even thanks Virgil for all his help with a meek smile on her face. The ending to this episode is what was so uplifting, and it made me well up even more, and that was the sermon Reverend Anderson gave during the Christmas Mass. And this was not just any Christmas Mass, but also an interfaith celebration where descendants of Muhammad, sons of Abraham, and all practicing Christians come together in order to celebrate the holidays, and they are all united in one roof. The sermon Reverend Anderson gives is what made me feel so uplifted, and it made me well up with tears of joy, because he also reminds everybody that even though the United States of America is a country that is continuing to progress and that is also defined by its diversity, there's still those people who are disadvantaged, who do not have a home, and who do not even deserve to be called the other class, or let alone homeless, because they're still people like you and me, and they deserve a second chance in life. In order to give them that second chance in life, we must show compassion, and that is what this episode taught me. Show compassion among your fellow men, and it does so with respect and reverence, thus making me fully comprehend how vital compassion is, especially in these trying times. 2020 may not have been the greatest year, what with the pandemic and all this international anxiety going on. However, if we can stay together, if we can show compassion to those who do not have a home, who do not have any place to go, who have ended up falling on hard times, then we can definitely make this world a better place. Finally, the episode wraps up with Richie greeting Virgil a very Merry Christmas, and with everyone united in the church to celebrate the holidays, and we even get a nice shot of the shining star that is a symbol of perpetual hope. So to say that Frozen Out left me with tears of sadness and tears of joy was definitely legitimate. This was an episode that not only made me feel for Permafrost and her situation growing up with such a troubled childhood, but it also made me root for her, that she will find help and that she will accept that she is not alone. it took time for her to accept it, because all these years she has built up all these ice walls to protect herself. The powers that she had were dangerous for a reason. These were powers used to protect herself from all the pain and trauma she had to go through as a child. And when a child goes through this much pain and trauma, it often messes up with their minds and their perception of life growing up. So it's very great that Static was able to lend a helping hand to Permafrost, because he knows fully well that, much like him, she is also a bang baby. Overlooking that aspect, both of them knew what it was like to grow up without a mother. So the relationship between Static and Permafrost was what made this episode great. And Permafrost herself was also the character who stood out, as she wanted love, but she could not have it. So she built this huge wall surrounded by trauma to protect herself, and at least in the very end, she does have a bit of a happy ending, but it will take time for her to get better. Characters aside, the music is also another facet about Static Shock that I've always loved. It managed to take advantage of its urban setting by implementing hip-hop beats, rap, and in this particular episode's case, gospel music, in order to let the feeling of the holidays shine all throughout the episode, whether it be in the opening or in that closing chorus. I definitely felt the strength and the power of the music. I can never deny how amazing the animation is, especially with how Permafrost used those powers to absolutely amazing yet terrifying effect. And let's also not forget about Static's great powers in terms of how he used electricity. And the character designs also reflect that realism, that they are still people like you and me. And even the setting is also reminiscent of reality. So when one thinks about it, this is also a mirror of what real life can be like, but with superheroes in Static Shock's case. What's a great show without great voice actors? Well, Static Shock has them. Not only in the likes of Phil Lamar, Kevin Michael Richardson, Danica McKellar, Jason Marsden, and Crystal Scales, but also Hynden Walch and Michael Dorn. This was definitely Hynden Walch's shining moment, not only as a voice actress, but also as someone who understood the psyche of Permafrost, as well as who she is as a character and as a person. She brought in so much authenticity and so much poignancy to Permafrost that she made me feel for all the trauma that she had to go through. She was able to bring an awareness within me that no child like her should ever have to undergo such trauma and pain, and she deserved a happier life. It's Hynden Walch's understanding of Permafrost and all the nuances that she was able to work with to give this character life. And given the timbre of Hynden Walch's voice, she is no stranger to voicing young girls, especially those who are innocent and who mean well to others. And in Permafrost's case, Hynden Walch managed to make Permafrost a very relatable and poignant character that I could have my heart go out to every single time she was on screen and every scene that she was in. So I salute Hynden Walch for making Permafrost a poignant and absolutely human character who had to undergo pain and trauma to try to survive in such a cruel world. Michael Dorn, who I mainly know him for his performances in Star Trek and of course I Am Weasel, gave a very authentic, human, and compassionate performance as Reverend Anderson. He also went toe-to-toe with Hynden Walch in terms of who ended up stealing the show from the main character's feet. And he did so with humanity as well as this authenticity that defined him not only as a voice actor, but also what he was able to inject in Reverend Anderson, as he made him, just like every other Reverend I have looked up to and knew ever since I was a kid. This authenticity that Michael Dorn emitted as Reverend Anderson was what made me also enjoy his performance with the utmost respect and absolute understanding of what Reverend Anderson does as a member of a community. So Frozen Out is definitely a must watch when it comes to my favorite Static Shock episodes. This episode ranks alongside Where Rubber Meets the Road, Sons of the Father, and Jimmy as my most favorite episodes of all time because they were not afraid to tackle all of these difficult topics and do so with the respect that we viewers expect from shows like this, as well as give them a human quality which makes us relate to the characters and what they are going through, as well as have a much better understanding of the world around us. And that was what Frozen Out managed to accomplish with flying colors. And for those of you who caught Frozen Out from Static Shock, what'd you think of it? Did you really enjoy Permafrost's tragic story to the point where your heart went out to her because of everything she had to go through and endure, such as her not so rosy childhood to her developing as a bang baby, especially with all of her magnificent powers, to finally finding the help that she so rightfully deserved through Virgil and Reverend Anderson alongside Joanna? Was there a moment in this episode that also made you cry and that also made you well up and reflect, especially what is going on in this world? Or did you feel like this episode did not really resonate with you? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's it for my tribute to Frozen Out from Static Shock. Tune in much later for my tribute to the Merry Nickmas shorts. So until then, happy holidays, everybody.